Good morning and welcome. We'll get started in just a minute or two. We know folks will be joining over the next 5 minutes and they won't be missing anything. We'll just be doing some housekeeping and introductions. Hello and good morning. My name is Jessica Gunderson from the Partnership for Children and Youth, and I will be your moderator for today. And welcome to the 4th of our summer game plan webinar series, which is aimed at providing information, resources, and inspiration to school and community-based educators around the state as we prepare for this coming summer and collectively work together to best serve young people. The Partnership for Children and Youth has been invested in summer learning and statewide efforts to increase access for many years, because we strongly believe our ability to provide high quality, engaging summer experiences to young people is a core piece of the puzzle when it comes to achieving equity in our education system. There are obviously a lot of challenges to planning and operating summer programs this year, but there's also a lot of opportunity given the increased public resources, the new flexibility we have, and the resilience we have seen across all stakeholders. Specifically, the California legislature and governor passed AB 86, which included a historic $4.6 billion for expanded and summer learning opportunities. This money is going out to school districts right now and is intended to be used this summer, throughout next year, and the following summer. This is on top of the American Rescue Plan Act, which was federal education stimulus round 3, and also provided significant resources for expanded and summer learning. We will put a funding guide that we recently released in the chat as an additional resources. In the past summers, the biggest challenge has always been funding, but this summer that's not the case. Instead, staffing, compressed timelines, overwhelmed school districts are our top challenges, which is why this webinar, we want to showcase how and why school districts should intentionally partner with higher education institutions of all kinds. One, to address staffing issues, but also more broadly to build the capacity of summer, the school day, and expanded learning programs. Today, we are lucky to have 4 great speakers from the broader Monterey region that bring a huge amount of experiences operating and supporting a wide range of school districts, schools, communities, and they bring a variety of perspectives. Our goal is that you walk away today and better understand how one regional partnership between a county office of education, a Cal State University, a community college, and several school districts are utilizing pre-service and teacher candidates to staff summer and expanded learning programs. We also want to provide insight on the variety of roles and resources higher education institutions can provide to support the quality and access of summer learning programs. Lastly, we want to think about what infrastructure and support needs to be in place to effectively bring these new teachers and partnerships into summer programs. And before we jump into the panel, I want to highlight a few key themes to keep in mind as we're moving through the webinar today. This summer, more than ever, it will require an all hands on deck approach. Schools will need to look beyond school personnel, including outreaching and partnering with their higher education institutions and county offices to staff, operate, and bring resources into their programs. Building collaborative relationships between teachers, administrators, school districts, expanded learning providers, higher education institutions, and teaching candidates is a win-win for all involved, which is what makes this partnership really unique, is that it really lifts all boats together. And it has a lasting effects to build the quality of educators and programming long-term. Building a robust ecosystem across schools, CBOs, and higher education is not unique to Monterey. We know that many schools of education already partner with the traditional school day to place pre-service teachers, and they just need to expand their thinking to systems that wrap around the school day. And there's many STEAM networks across the state that we could build upon. What I want you to know is the elements and the stakeholders in Monterey exist all across the state and should be developed to meet the unique needs of each school community. And what's also interesting about Monterey is it has both suburban and rural communities. So it's really applicable to a lot of places around California. There are both near-term this summer and long-term opportunities to better connect students pursuing careers in education to paid work experiences in schools across the state, given the huge infusions of state and federal money for summer and after-school learning. Lastly, at the very least, schools and community partners should be advertising and outreaching to their local higher education institutions to find and connect qualified staff to meet the needs of their summer programs. So just a reminder before we get started, this webinar is part of a series, as mentioned. If this is the first time you're joining us, welcome. If the content is useful, we hope you'll check out our previous webinars on summer learning research, other staffing solutions, and serving high school students. We will do the question and answer as we go versus waiting till the end. So please be sending your thoughts, your comments, ideas, and questions in the chat, and we will be sure to integrate it throughout the program. Now we're going to hear from our first two panelists. Just a note that this first panel was pre-recorded a few days ago, but as you will hear, the ecosystem in Monterey is a very, very tight-knit group. So our second panel will be able to answer any questions that you would have had for Mara and Will. So it's a great opportunity for me to first introduce Mara Wolds. We can move the slide one back, thank you. Mara brings over 20 years experience in program development, program management, stakeholder collaboration, and project-based curriculum design. She is the regional lead for Region 5. Her greatest passion is that all students have access to the highest quality expanded learning experiences. Mara directs the provision of support services to the region's school district grantees and community partners with a focus on increasing the cohesion between in and out of school time. Our second panelist is William Franzel, who is currently an educational administrator who leads science and STEM for the Monterey County Office of Education. Will is responsible for facilitating science professional learning opportunities with TK all the way through 12th grade educators and administrators in Monterey County. His skills include designing, developing, and implementing workshops aligned to the NGSS standards while approaching this work with a combined lens of empathy and equity. So with that, let's turn it over to our first panel.
My name is Mara Wold. I'm the regional lead for Region 5 Expanded Learning Partnerships based out of the Monterey County Office of Education. And I want to thank Jessica and team for inviting me here today. And Will, maybe you should introduce yourself too real quick.
Yeah, my name is Will Franzel. I'm the Educational Administrator of Science and STEAM at the Monterey County Office of Education. Thanks for the invitation, Jessica.
And we just sort of wanted to share the story of how we got to know each other and how we got to know Corrine and Julie over at CSUMB and Hartnell College. And really our relationship started, Will, I think, with this opportunity we've had to do some work together to boost the capacity and the confidence of our after-school educators in the STEAM world. And I wanted to just start by sharing a story of Miss Jennifer, and this is my daughter, Maddie. And Miss Jennifer was pursuing her teaching credential for quite some time. And I remember picking my daughter up one day and she said, you know, Mara, I need to share with you that this is my last week. Unfortunately, I I'm at a point in my teaching credential where I need to do my practicum hours. And although I bring everything that I have learned in the process of getting my teaching credential here to the after school program, my hours will not count. And so I can't do both, and I'm going to need to leave. And that saddened me greatly. It also inspired me and put a fire in my belly about what can we do to increase our collaborative relationships with our institutions of higher education, our teacher credentialing programs, so that people like Miss Jennifer have a pathway to teaching. They obviously bring so much by way of being solid and grounded in youth development principles, but they're also bringing what they've been learning in their teacher preparation programs to the field. And it's such a win-win relationship. And I know that this is a hard slide to read, but I just wanted to highlight again how Will and I met. We are a part, we're very fortunate in Monterey County Office of Ed being the lead COE for the Region 5 STEAM hubs, that we operate STEAM communities of practice, which is a year-long process where we, again, are gaining or helping our staff to gain the confidence and competence and skills that they need to operate good, high quality expand STEAM programming in their after school program. And so learning how to become a facilitator of learning and learning some foundational skills is where Will and I have had the chance to interact with each other. And we've needed his expertise and his partnership through the COE to really boost the rigor and relevance of the content of our COPs. And then from there, it was really looking at our relationship with Miss Jennifer and as our inspiration of how does a young woman like that, who's getting our teaching credential, who's also working in expanded learning, how could she potentially get some sort of course credit or really be honored for her work in expanded learning while she's becoming a teacher? And these have really led to a much larger collaborative and ecosystem that has formed in our region that's combined this notion of professional development and communities of practice with collaborative partnerships, knowing that we need our institutions of higher education to be on board with this, as well as folks who are very passionate from the front line, our community-based organizations and our district-run programs who are looking at the need for staff. So how do we combine workforce, staff recruitment and retention with our COP and professional development and our collaborative partnerships? How do they come together to really form an opportunity for us to innovate and get creative with a problem or a challenge that we have in both of our worlds? We need solid staff and after school. We also need to develop pathways to teaching. And those teachers need to be representative of our communities, which we are blessed to have in our expanded learning field. We have incredible people who work, they work in the communities that they live. They represent the communities that they serve. And it's a fabulous opportunity for us to be collaborative in our work together. So, well, I don't know, I'll take off the slides and maybe we can just chat a little bit and you can share too your perspective of what it was like to join in this effort.
It's aligned to our standards, our frameworks, and just being able to take participants through that process of it, experiencing it like the learner, I think has just really opened their eyes as far as like, oh, this is what it could be like, during expanded learning, which then we've heard tends to influence what may be happening during the core day, because we're able to take some risks with our group and they see a lot of success. They're able to take those risks and then come back and share, what's working and where are their challenges. And again, just the way that we design and, kind of plan out these COPs has really helped in other circles that I'm involved in, as far as getting creative, collaborating with the team. And then, like you mentioned, starting with a problem, right, a problem to solve or a phenomena to try to make sense of. and kind of taking the participants through that process together of kind of an inquiry approach, where they're able to, engage in hands-on experiences, even during distance learning. We figured that one out. I feel like we didn't figure it out. We're still figuring it out, but we tried some different things that other folks weren't trying quite yet. So, and I do want to share too that I believe what we found is that all of our kind of core beliefs line up, how we really kind of see what education is and what it could be. And we all have a different lens on how we see it. So for instance, my background is more elementary. I was in the classroom for 16 years and then an instructional coach for a couple of years. And so I bring that background with me to the team. And then we have folks like Corrine Sloan who have, more of a higher ed and secondary background. So that really kind of, complements one another and really makes a whole team, for a kind of a K-16 experience. So, yeah.
Great. Well, we want to save some time for questions, and I have several for both of you. And so I'll lob the questions, and then you two can decide who wants to take it on. I think just like one thing I have, if we were talking to an LEA or a school about what assets and resources the county office is bringing to the table, what would you say, right? Just really transactional. What is your role, and what assets and resources is the county office providing?
Yeah, so as far as talking with our LEAs, we're here for them, and we've really, I feel like I think of like a chef analogy where the menu has changed in the last year especially. So we do a lot of listening. We'll ask good questions and we find out where is there a need, and we kind of cook to order, right? So our menu has changed in the last year. But I would also say that we look at our other districts in Monterey County and we find out who are those innovators that are taking those risks that may be willing to share, and kind of look at those models and what they have in place. And we're true collaborators. We try to connect folks. So let's get them in the same room and let's share what our successes and what are our challenges and how can we, figure it out together. So that would probably be the conversation I'd have. And I tend to be more of, when I'm not on a webinar, I tend to be more of a listener, and I try to ask a good question and then sit back and really take it in and try to figure out what question to ask next.
And so what I'm hearing, and Mara, please add, but just what I'm hearing from you is, one, it's professional development, access to professional development, the convening, the space and planning time needed for those things, and then kind of curriculum and different types of expertise, which is connected to the professional development. Mara, is there anything else you wanted to add?
Only that I feel that the COEs are such a critical partner in the work that we do. I know that the relevance and the rigor would not be there without our COE partners. And so I am truly grateful for the expertise that Will and you hear us mention Rod and Denise. Those are math and also our tech administrators. If we didn't have that collaboration and that opportunity to partner with them, I know our professional development from the expanded learning side would not be as great as it is. It does take a team to be innovative and to be creative. And we also know that we're building a cohesive educational system because we're working so closely together.
Great. And you kind of mentioned that this was a response to some challenges, and we're obviously in challenging times right now. But we're all pushing for creativity, innovation, thinking outside of the box. So I'd be curious what your advice is for this type of partnership, whether you're speaking to a peer at a COE or maybe a school district ally, where to start now in these challenging times. What would your advice be? I'd love to hear from both of you.
Yeah, Mara, do you want to go first?
Sure. And I think that's a really great question. I think we have got to get rid of our fear of innovation, our fear of doing things differently. I hear learning recovery, and I I'm not sure that I'm altogether supportive of how that's framed. I think that we've all lost some skills that I think we need to regain, but I think we have this opportunity for learning acceleration. I heard that this morning on another webinar, and I love that term because we've got to let down our guard, and we've got to embrace the fact that we are not going to go back to the way things were exactly the prior pandemic. But we've learned so much in this process. So how do we take the best of what we've learned to move forward? And that means letting down our fear and our guard of the unknown, and really embrace innovation, embrace creativity. And that starts with the people that you know. That's how our whole collaborative formed, our whole larger ecosystem that we're a part of started because it was reaching out. Hey, well, here's this idea. What do you think about being more closely connected in terms of some PD that we're going to do, which led to an introduction to Corrine over at CSUMB. I had other connections that led to other connections. It's really embracing and a collective vision, and that's really critical. And I think when every entity is coming in with an enlightened self-interest, and that's a really key term, enlightened self-interest. Nobody's here for their own agenda, but we're here for a collective agenda to do what's right for kids. We are fully on a path to doing some wonderful things together.
Yeah, absolutely. I could build off that. So, you mentioned Corrine, and I met Mara 5 years ago, and I met Corrine 4 years ago. And at one point I thought, how can I get the two of them together? So we have monthly NGSS collaborative network meetings. We invited Mara, and just in a 10-minute conversation between Mara and Corrine, it turned into this deeper relationship where we're now collaborating all the time. And you can see these kind of, the higher ed connecting with expanded learning, connected with core day. And then I'd also add to that, when you have kind of the leaders, you've identified the leaders, and you're able to, plan together and design together, then you really need to ask questions. And I think right now, when I was reflecting on this year, who knows better about what's happening in the classroom than the teachers and the students themselves? I taught in the classroom for many years, but I never taught full distance learning during a pandemic. So I think we really need to listen to our teachers, our folks in expanded learning, everyone that's actually done this, and ask what's worked, what's going to return to in-person or hybrid instruction, and what can we strategically abandon that wasn't working even pre-pandemic. Now's the time to reimagine and redesign our systems so they work for all of our students. And back to Mara's point, I believe that we all kind of line up in our core beliefs and our why. So that's why we really enjoy working with one another.
Yeah.
Great. Well, I want to close with one more question, and that's maybe, what are you most looking forward to seeing this summer, or what have you heard about as innovative models? And try to be as specific as possible, whether it's staffing or calendars. Just what have you either heard of or looking towards this summer as it relates to this topic of partnerships with higher ed and staffing?
Try to be as specific as possible. There are many programs that are tapping into their college relationships and their partnerships to seek out additional staff. We do know that is a real critical need. And so specifically, and again, this is where relationships come into play. When we don't have the relationships with one another, it's much harder to be able to really to move forward in solving and combating some of the problems that we face, like staffing shortage. So specifically, programs are reaching out to their higher ed partners, and we're helping to broker that resource this summer to enable a greater pool, an available pool of workers. So we're seeing that. And then I think on the programming side, we're seeing a lot of creativity with various collaborative grants that have been written, for example, for, Coder JoJo, which I know, Corrine and Julie are working on in the Monterey County area. there's just some creative programming and innovative programming that's happening, again, when we put our heads together and when we work together. Will, you
And I
may.
just wanted to flag, Mar, that you said you're still doing the staffing matching, right? So for those of you out there, that it's not too late. People are still doing that right now. That is still a work in progress. We're not past that. So
No.
if you haven't done it yet, there's still time. Just wanted to make
Absolutely.
sure everyone out there heard that.
Yep.
Sorry for interrupting.
Yeah. Nope.
Will,
And I
you want to
can-
close this out?
So I think one of the most important things that people can do right now relative to the staffing issue is making sure that you are connecting with your contacts out there in the community, particularly your higher ed contacts, because there are students who are going to school throughout the course of the summer now and in the summer. And now is the time to definitely connect our college students to opportunities in expanded learning as we move forward with our programming options. And then Will, do you want to share specifically about some ideas for actual programming that you know
Yeah,
are
for sure. So we've had a few districts reach out to us about designing summer STEM academies. A couple of those folks are on the webinar today. So for instance, Lamari and Greenfield, we're designing a Migrant Ed STEM Academy for K-8 that will run June through July. And there's going to be definitely a focus on the math connections, right? So we're bringing in Denise Green to help us design that. And we're also collaborating with their science, math, and ed tech TOSAs to make sure it's connected to their year-round, kind of the work they've been doing during the school year and into the next school year, because Greenfield's just doing such fantastic work. So we want to build off that work. And then we also have Salina City, who Julie is working with at Hartnell to design a STEM academy for, I believe it's K-6 or maybe first grade through sixth grade. That will run through the summer and again, be aligned to the standards. And I'm going to be collaborating with them to help launch that with their teachers in early June. So, and there's more districts that are starting to think about, where, like what Mara said, how could we accelerate the learning, especially with that science lens, and also thinking about the connections to outdoor and environmental literacy, getting students outside, because we know, one, it's safer, right? And two, it really supports social emotional well-being, not only for our students, but also for our teachers. Yeah. So just, get outside during the summer and enjoy it, right? And a lot of teaching and learning is going to happen outside, I'm hoping, this summer.
Great. Well, actually, that was a great closing to touch upon both the social emotional health of all of our adults in the system, as well as the children and their families, and then highlighting the importance of environmental education and outdoor learning is a topic area that many of our participants have brought up. So we'll definitely want to follow up with you and your team on resources and ideas on digging in even deeper on that piece as well. So thank you both for your time, and we look forward to learning more with you and working with you all in the future. Yeah. Have a great day.
Thank you. Jessica. Thanks, Jessica. Bye.
Great. That was our first panel, and we'll pull up the bios and introductions for our next panel. But before we get there, you kind of heard a lot about the how and the why of these robust partnerships that were developed with the county office, CSU Monterey, and Hartnell Community College. You heard our panelists refer to Corrine and Julie often. So we are lucky that they're the next ones on our panel and really can speak to some of that direct programming and direct placement. So I'd like to first introduce Corrine Sloan, who is an assistant professor of science education at Cal State University of Monterey Bay. She holds a BS in chemistry from Yale University and a PhD in organic synthetic chemistry from the Scripps Research Institute. She works with the Undergraduate Research Opportunity Center, where she coordinates the course-based undergraduate research experiences fellows program. And she's also the lead for the National Science Foundation Noyes Rural Integrated STEM Education Ready program, which is offered in many places across the state. Lastly, she's a collaborator with the National Institute of Health Science Education Partnership teaching how we can teach science through the arts, and environmental health education in agriculture communities. And I'd also like to welcome Julie Stevens-Carrillo, who is the Director of K-12 STEM Education for Harnell Community College. She holds a BA in Liberal Studies and a BS in Health Sciences and a master's degree in Curriculum Instruction and Assessment. And what you'll hear from her talking points as well is she has taught both at the elementary and high school levels, a lot of experience directly in schools, and has also acted as an academic coach supporting elementary, middle, and high school administrators, teachers, and students. So we're lucky to have you both, and I will turn it over to Corrine, who's going to pull up some slides right now. Thanks for being here, Corrine. I'll pass the mic to you.
Thanks so much, Jessica, for the introduction. We appreciate it. I'm going to share my slides. One of the things that I really appreciate about what Will and Mara shared earlier is this idea of building capacity. So when we think about the expanded learning and teacher pathway, one of the things that we're really thinking about is how we can effectively recruit at all levels. So for example, I know that there's work that Mara has done really thinking about how to recruit students who are currently participating in expanded learning programs, and to think about leadership as they become community college students to become staff for those expanded learning programs. But we also think about recruiting from community college students who maybe have not experienced expanded learning, but are interested in growing their skill sets at developing collaboration, at building their communities. In fact, I was really struck by the statistics that when we think about our expanded learning staff, 78% come from the communities that they're serving. And so when we think about recruiting, one of the spaces that we think about is from Hartnell College, which is why Julie is such a phenomenal partner and really leader when we think about how to help place students. But then there are other spaces that we think about too. So for example, it's not uncommon for us to have students who maybe are a little bit further in their academic path, but are trying to make decisions about whether or not working with youth is their passion. And so if we think about maybe juniors or seniors in their undergraduate pathway who are starting to think about service learning or opportunities maybe to intern, then working with expanded learning is a great fit for them as well. In fact, I was really struck by the statistic that 63% of our expanded learning staff are between the ages of 20 and 29. And so when you think about the academic pathway, that really encompasses the scope of community college, university, but then we also have the folks who have already committed to a teaching pathway, say, for example, individuals who are pursuing a credential, and those individuals wanting to gain additional experience as they hone their practices for working in the classroom. And one of the things that I really appreciate from Will is this reflection that core day and expanded learning are actually the best of allies, where true synergy between those programs benefits our students. And so the extent to which someone who's becoming a core day teacher can be familiar with the strengths of expanded learning is a great way to be able to enhance the learning experience for students. So it's really interesting to me to think about, when we're thinking about places that we find staffing, to start to think about recruiting from multiple populations. And so whether that's recruiting staff from community college or from universities, but also then I think COVID has created a unique opportunity. So we have credential candidates who have done a phenomenal job in their programs, but are hungry, right, to develop not just their hybrid learning skills, but also their face-to-face skills. And so those are great opportunities to recruit specifically for this summer programming as well. A great example would be if you have someone who has completed a credential program and has been hired on by a district, doing summer programming would be an awesome way to introduce them, not just to the student body, but to the district, the site, the staff. And it's a phenomenal opportunity for them to develop rapport with students and to implement programming. Likewise, you may have credential individuals who have completed their program but have not yet found a district. And what better way for districts to be able to build a relationship and potentially hire someone who would be a great fit for their campus. So as we've been thinking and brainstorming about these different populations, part of what we recognized is that it really is the relationships between us as educators and as administrators that helps to build that professional network that allows us to make those connections. So we have a couple of examples that we wanted to share that we think highlight the potential and the power of those relationships. So for example, when we talk about growing our own, we're thinking about districts partnering with staff who are already members of the community. A great example of this is Brenda. So she started working with the Greenfield Science Community Workshop, being mentored by Kurt and Jose. And this was a great experience because it was hands-on learning where she was really facilitating inquiry for students. Her skill set was noticed by Greenfield Union School District, specifically by Dr. Gutierrez, who encouraged her to think about applying for the integrated teacher preparation program at CSUMB. And so Brenda joined that program and is now working closely with Greenfield Union School District, both in their core day classes, but also volunteering and working in their after school programming because she wants to gain that additional experience facilitating student learning. Another great example that we've talked about and is one that we love to celebrate is Peter. So Peter's doing current work with after school programming around the Bird School project. And he recognized how important it was for students to be outside and just the amount of joy that he saw in students as a result of their participation in this curriculum. So his mentor, Kevin, encouraged him to think about collecting that data and using it as part of his capstone project, where he was able to use assessment to show the improvement in learning of the students and to demonstrate the efficacy of this outdoor curriculum. Peter was so engaged with this project that he's not only going to continue doing it after he's graduated from CSUMB working with the Bird School project this summer, but he's also applied to and been accepted to a credential program at UCSC and is going to develop this with school districts in Santa Cruz County, as well as the work that he's doing in Monterey County. Part of the reason why we share these examples is you'll notice that the pattern or the trend here is that it's early experience that then is cultivated, developed, and really built into leadership that these individuals then take as they navigate and negotiate their own academic and career professional pathways, which I think Mara talked about earlier and I think is so compelling. Will talked about the extent to which the professional learning or the professional development is part of this process. And so I love this slide because it shows you the pieces of that professional learning puzzle. So for example, Richard is a colleague who founded Fused Learning. They're informal educators who partner with our local school districts. In fact, they partnered with Julie when she was teaching in Gonzales to bring maker spaces through grant funding to that school district. Jeff S. and Gloria are staff specifically with Region 2, which has a significant number of rural school sites. And so they're phenomenal partners for us because we have a mixed county with both suburban, urban, and rural. And so their expertise has been phenomenal, say, for example, in thinking about how to bring drones to our after school programming. But those programming pieces aren't possible without the staffing. And so that's where Julie becomes such a critical component of this conversation because she's working with the Hartnell College students to really develop and cultivate them as staff. And I think from a partnership standpoint, one of the things that Will hit on early was this idea of, well, how do we collaboratively network both in the sense of making introductions? So how can we connect students with someone who's the next kind of piece in their pathway or their journey? And we can also do that for professionals. So the other example that I want to share before I pass over to Julie to share about the phenomenal programming that they're doing at Hartnell are two examples of recruiting strategies for staffing in terms of leadership. So a great example in terms of leveraging experience is Liz. So she has extensive experience working with an LEA and expanded learning, both in terms of original staffing as well as site coordination. And now she's actually an education partner with Fused Learning, providing support to multiple districts. But part of the reason why she's a phenomenal asset with fused learning is because of her deep familiarity with expanded learning. And so she really has an understanding of the needs of that population. And so she's a great example of recruiting leadership where we develop and cultivate folks who are deeply familiar with the work of expanded learning, but then also send them out to be thoughtful and creative, collaborative partners with our informal educators. And then the other example that we've been thinking about, because it's so relevant presently, are lateral transitions and mentoring. And this is really recruiting from education partners. So I use this example. So Will introduced me to Lise, and she did phenomenal informal education with expanded learning programs across Monterey County. But she is now the director at the Pacific Grove Natural History Museum. And what I have been so impressed by is her ongoing work to take education providers who, say, for example, during COVID were laid off and place them with districts. So she has a group of educators who are bilingual, who are highly qualified, who have great experience with expanded learning, and are able to connect them with districts, with other informal educators as staff for their programming. So I think it's important that we think about holistically the pathway in terms of recruiting. And these are just a few examples of creative ways that we can make connections. So with that, I will turn it over to Julie, one of my favorite connections ever.
Thank you, Corrine. Thank you all for listening to us today. I just wanted to kind of talk about my program. I am in charge of the K-12 STEM at Hartnell College. I work with school districts and create different programmings for them, for either after school, Saturdays, summer programming, that kind of thing. And one of the things that kind of stands out and that we started when I took this position not close to 2 years ago was we began hiring student ambassadors, which are our Hartnell students who mostly were in our teacher pathways programs to help and assist and let them work into the classrooms, assisting the teachers doing our STEM lessons, our NASA STEM lessons and our coding lessons. They're able to pull small groups. They were able to get hands-on training in these classrooms, being able to take what they were learning in their teaching program and putting it to work and trying it out, building their toolbox even before they even hit their first year teaching. What a concept. Many of my kids really thought, my ambassadors really thought, oh, I really like kindergarten. You're so, so cute. But giving them the opportunity to go into class, it may not have been a good fit for them. And they were able to figure that out before they were stuck. And they were able to go, you know what, I don't think I want early childhood. I think I just want to do liberal now and kind of build those way out. And then others thought, you know what, I really like those upper kid grades, those 5th and 6th grade. And I really want them to be able to do that. And this really gave them that opportunity. So I hire those. And I also hire for my Coder Dojo program, which I'm also involved in. I also hire both Hartnell and CSUMB students. And we call them our professional experts because they are students for this program that are majoring in computer science. I am not a computer science major. I'm a liberal studies major. I can teach many different things, but that is not something I can teach in my classroom to the level and to the depth and breadth that we want them to learn coding, and they need to learn coding. These students are able to create curriculum and teach these lessons and again, give them experience thinking, do I really want to be a teacher? That may not have been something that crossed their mind before, but now that they're in classrooms, they're thinking, well, that may not be too bad. But it also, as a district or someone else, you've just opened up something else that you could offer that you may not have been able to offer before. So this allows us, as a credentialed teacher thing, I may not have taken that or may not have existed when I started my program. It gives us time to go look in there and say, listen, we can't afford a music teacher or we can't afford an art teacher, but maybe we can get someone from the college to come in and sit in and teach these lessons as the credentialed teacher just sits back to make sure monitor the class. And it really opens up new pathways for both after school programming and extended learning. Corrine?
I think one of the things that I've noticed too, when Julie and I have had these conversations, so the populations that we serve vary across the communities. So Julie put together this map just to give you a sense of the expanse that her staff cover. And one of the things that's been really powerful is that students from these communities are able to connect with opportunities to essentially do near peer mentoring. So when we think about the staff and the development that we're trying to recruit, part of this is really thinking about the students advocating for folks who are 3 to 4 years behind them in an academic pathway. And one of the strengths, I think, of that is the way that Julie has structured the Coder Dojo program is specifically that type of mentoring. So in a way, the professional learning that we're talking about in terms of cultivating staff actually already exists within the structure of Julie's program because it is students teaching, reaching, and mentoring students in order to develop their coding skills. And so it's not uncommon, say, for example, to have a student from Gonzales who went to Hartnell, who then became a computer science major, and the person that they're working with as staff is a student from their local high school or is a student from their local middle school. And the extent to which they're able to connect and collaborate with them is pretty incredible, I think, when we're trying to make sense of, well, how do I help see what academic pathways are possible? And more importantly, how do I see expanded learning as an opportunity to professionally advance in my career? One of the questions actually that I always have for Julie is, I feel like the work that she does with districts is often one where they're reaching out. And the challenge is, how do I find the staff to be able to meet the needs of the districts? And I think that the Hartnell students and the CSUMB students have actually been that sweet spot. Julie, do you want to talk a little bit about how you even connect with your ambassadors and then connect them with the districts in which they're doing programming?
We really try to we try to give the students also choice, because many of our students and Hartnell students come from like, oh, I went to Alice House schools, I need to go back. And they want to go back to their former schools, their former teachers, and kind of touch base and give them those options. But they, it just kind of varies on what they want to do and what they want to see. Many of my students have never been been in a STEM class or have never taught STEM. So this is, this gives them an opportunity to say, it's really not that bad. I've sat through it and, and I've helped the teacher and the kids loved it. And, yes, mistakes were made and we all laughed and we learned from it. And that's just part of, being a scientist. And I think that just kind of lowers that affective filter, like saying, hey, I can make mistakes, the kids can make mistakes, and we can kind of go on from there and learn from each other. So, it kind of varies. If they're in a computer science field, obviously we try to go with, their level. We also try to go with what they say. They like, oh, I really want to try upper grades. So we'll try to push them that way. So we're trying to kind of work with their pathway or their choice in what they're envisioning their next steps to be, and to kind of give them those opportunities, again, to build those skills ahead of time and saying, oh, is this really what I want? Or is it time for me to say, I need to rethink things. I need to think about, do I really want elementary or middle or high school? And then, and where do I fit in with things? So it's been a learning curve. Again, we just started it when I first started. So we're all learning together.
I think, oh, sorry, go
Sorry,
ahead.
Corinne, did you want to answer those questions in the chat?
That was my thinking. I saw a question from Carla, and I think I saw a question from Michael. And so Carla's question was specifically addressing kind of examples of programming. So in addition to the work that Julie has done with the introduction to coding and Coder Dojo, Will referenced outside time. And so one of the ways, actually, this is a shout out to Jennifer Ellman. So Will and Jennifer Ellman have collaborated with Mark Gomez from Salinas Union High School District and Robin Putney Mendenhall to think specifically about ways that they can connect our students during summer and after school programming with the PORTS program. So this is a California State Parks initiative. And what I think is really powerful about this is that these are lesson plans that can live in the core day classroom, but they can also live in expanded learning. And so these are opportunities for students to connect with a physical place that's near them, that's outside, but also to explore the way that that place is connected to community. And so I think the strength of that programming is that it's something that's co-designed. You heard that that was a theme that Mara and Will referenced. And I think one of the strengths of expanded learning staffing is that engaging staffing in that co-design component is actually professional learning too. The opportunity to learn from folks like Will and Jennifer who have expertise in terms of designing those lessons, the opportunity to learn from Robin and Mark who are familiar with their district and the culture and the teaching and learning opportunities within expanded learning in their district. And so the opportunity to connect staff with that type of co-design and implementation is a really great opportunity, I think, to both leverage the programming itself, but also to think about how recruiting staffing can be a way of engendering professional development as well.
I had a question for you, Julie. You talk about your ambassador program, which I haven't seen anywhere else. And I think especially in the time of learning acceleration is going to be particularly important to bring additional adults to have the right ratio of kids to adults, and then also bring in extra support. And was there a challenge getting those ambassadors in the classroom? Sometimes we see barriers in certain schools and certain districts. So I'd love for you to it's possible, and just to explain how you get those ambassadors, into the classrooms alongside teachers.
I was very thankful. Like I said, I work with Salinas City Elementary and LSL Union in particular, and they were very open to trying something new like this. And so we were, got fingerprinted. They have to go through all the same kind of things that, to kind of get the background going and stuff. And we walked them through, we trained them. They went through the same teacher training we give the teachers. So anything that we do that we, if it's a NASA coding, little bits, whatever we're doing, that our students are trained with the teachers, so that they understand the program, they understand what's all the materials and supplies needed, and so that they can also help support the teacher if needed. Not necessarily teaching the lesson, but they're there to listen and learn, and then pull small groups or whatever to help support.
And I was wondering, you guys are talking about all the creative partnerships in Greenfield, Salinas, a range of districts. And I was just wondering, do school districts approach you, whether it's Corrine or Julie, or are you out there knocking on doors of different school districts? Just kind of how do these partnerships come to be?
Well, Julie is in really high demand. So I would say that districts often come and seek out Julie, honestly, because of the reputation of her program and the fact that Alisal and Salinas City are so happy with the programming that's going on. I think that sometimes it's also, we're super fortunate to have experts like Will Franzel, Denise Green, Rod Garcia, and Jennifer Elliman, in that they're familiar with programming that is available for school districts. And so oftentimes one of the things that they do a great job of is kind of sharing those opportunities. So it's not uncommon. In fact, I love watching Will and Jennifer's Twitter handles, because essentially they're always on the leading edge of programming that's available to districts. And so often they will do the footwork of making sure that districts are apprised of opportunities. I think in terms of connecting students and staffing, that's actually one of the ways in which talk about trying to build capacity. I think we're trying to do a better job of communicating. So districts reaching out and communicating need, like, Francine Stewart says, hey, you know what, we've got really phenomenal programming that we're going to do at MPUSD, but I think we need at least 4 more students. Any chance that CSUMB service learners can help support summer programming? Or say, for example, if there's an opportunity, Will did a great job with this with Baranda Meadows, where they wanted to do an after-school STEAM club, and Dr. Janet Gutierrez was really innovative in terms of her vision and what this would look like. And so it was collaborating with the district to try and achieve the vision. So I would say that it's really about the conversation, the dialogue between districts and our education partners.
And Corrine, I know we have folks from CSUs on the webinar. And so I just wanted to reiterate, I think what you're saying too is all this impetus doesn't have to be on the school day and the expanded learning providers. CSUs, community colleges should also be actively outreaching to their local education entities to provide support and resources. I wanted to, we only have a few minutes left, and I wanted to address a question that came up and then pose one more question for the two of you, and then I can probably wrap up in 2 minutes. It was from an after-school director who doesn't have an expanded learning division at their school district, which many small ones don't. And then also their county office doesn't have an expanded learning division either. And so kind of where can he or she go to build these partnerships? And one, I would say, student support services, typically in many smaller school districts, will sometimes be prioritizing after school and expanded learning both at the county office. So that could be one. And I would say in this time and moment, everyone is focused on their acceleration plan, AB 86. So whoever's overseeing that plan, which is might be curriculum and instruction, they have a vested interest in thinking about how expanded learning is supporting students and student learning. And then lastly, everyone has a regional lead. So Mara is a regional lead housed at Monterey County, but she oversees many counties. And so everyone in the state does have a regional lead that they should be going to and asking for support. And last, if I was a school district and I don't have a partnership with my CSU or a higher education institution or my community college, what would be the best way for me to introduce or outreach to you, Corrine and Julie? Like, what should I be saying or pitching to get support? Because I've never worked with you before. I'm not really sure how to best approach that. So I'd love, just maybe a 1 or 2 minutes advice for those that are going to hopefully after this webinar approach their higher education partners. And then I'll close this up.
It's such a great question, Jennifer. I think there's probably 3 approaches you can take. One, you can email us. We'll happily put you in contact with either the CSU faculty in your region, or there are a number of region collaborators. So for example, I love working with Gloria and Jeff because they're already connected with CSU Chico. They're already connected with their local community colleges. And so if you're an educator, say for example, in that area, we can put you in contact with them, and they're a great pipeline to folks who can help you troubleshoot, problem solve, and recruit staff. Another opportunity, I think, is within the county offices of education. So Mara and Will have done such a phenomenal job. For example, I had a question about resources from San Diego County, and Will not only knew the person that I needed to talk to, but had their telephone number, made an email introduction. And so I think Mara and Will are great examples of county folks who are tied into networks, and invariably they know someone. In fact, Mara was the person who introduced me to Jennifer, and had it not been for that connection, I wouldn't know about the phenomenal advocacy work that that's going on. So I feel like they're a really great resource too. But then the other one, and Julie, you're going to have to speak to this, but I actually think that our local municipalities, in addition to, say, for example, our CSUs and community colleges, also have a role to play. Do you want to talk about the 5 cities, Julie, and the work that they do?
Well, the 5 cities is for South County, and it's all the city managers get together, and they have built a kind of, they get to work together, they figure out what they need, the needs of the communities that they serve, the needs of the area that we serve, looking at workforce development, education, everything. And so what we've done is, we've partnered with them to say, listen, what can we help you with? We're Corrine, CSUMB and Hartnell are partners with MCOE with a Fab Lab, the Central Coast Fab Lab that's coming out. And so, this is something that we can bring to you. What do you think? You also, for us, I work in South County as well. I live in South County. Look at your local partners. Look what you already have. Look what's in your local cities and stuff. You have, your local YMCA, your Boys and Girls Club. There's other things that you can really reach out to that can really support you, and help support those things. So that's all I'll say.
No, and we're right here at 11 o'clock. I apologize, we're going to be a minute or 2 over, but there's more questions to be had. So first, I just wanted to thank all 4 of our panelists. I learned so much. Thank you for your time and expertise. And I'm sure you're going to be hopefully getting some more emails I also want to thank everyone for joining us today. Before we sign off, we have a survey in the chat and we'd love for you to fill it out. It's not only planning for next webinars, but also what tools, direct trainings folks are going to need in this next year to support summer and expanded learning. Next week, next Thursday at 10 a.m., we have our next webinar is really focused on summer and early learners, which is particularly important this year, given how many were disconnected from their school experience. And lastly, we want to thank the California Collaborative for Educational Excellence for supporting us to offer this series. And hopefully it can be as useful to the field as possible. So as you're filling out that survey, again, thank you, and we'll see you next time. And I hope everyone has a great day, and don't hesitate to reach out to Partnership for Children and Youth and everyone on this panel, and we will do everything we can to support you with more resources and additional information. So have a great day, and with that, we can sign off. Bye, and thank you.